Do you all know why so many people refer to this month of October as the spooky time of the year? Hello everyone, for those who know me, welcome back, and for those who are new here, you are very welcome. I'm Irene Ridarelli and this is Into the Books. For people who do not live in or come from an Anglo-Saxon country like the UK, but especially the USA, let me briefly explain why October is known as it is. It pretty much boils down to one day. October 31st, the day Halloween is celebrated. The tradition of Halloween on October 31st comes from the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. Samhain was the Celtic New Year and they celebrated it on November the 1st because that day was the end of the harvest time, life, and the beginning of winter, death. It was also the time for spirits to return to earth for a day. Above I said, especially in the US, because in this country, this celebration is stronger and longer than any other country, and its people start celebrating from the first day of October. During this month, it is very common to see the exteriors of American homes decorated with motifs related to Halloween. Not only the exteriors of the houses are decorated in this way, but also the interiors. Shopping malls, stores, restaurants, streets, etc. So this period is rightly considered as the spooky time of the year. And that is exactly what gave me the idea to present you 3 books that fit this time of the year and that you can read in the run-up to Halloween. Now, I would like to invite you to take a pen and paper and write down the titles of the books I'm going to talk about, and I hope you will enjoy today's episode. Let's start easy. The first book is The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Tartan, which is actually a thriller and not an horror, like the other 2 titles I'll tell you about later. Plus, it's my favorite of the 3 books. I probably shouldn't say this so as not to influence your preferences, but honestly, I couldn't help myself. Nothing, absolutely nothing, seems to make sense. The only certainty is who is the victim. Evelyn Hardcastle, the protagonist, in order to return to his body, must find the solution to an enigma that, of course, makes no sense. How is he supposed to find a murderer when the victim took her own life in front of everyone? He, or at least his consciousness, wakes up in the middle of a forest feeling confused and apparently having lost all his memories. He has no idea why or how he got there. As he tries to figure out what has happened to him, he hears a scream not far from where he is. He turns to where the scream came from and catches a glimpse of a woman, Hannah, running away screaming for help. Not knowing what to do, he hesitates for a few moments, during which the woman disappears. What he does not know is that this incident is the real beginning of his journey. As he runs towards the place where he last saw the woman, a man approaches him from behind. This mysterious man, who the protagonist is sure is Anna's murderer and soon to be even his own, puts an object on his pocket and gives him directions to Blackheath Manor, the Hardcastle mansion. The protagonist is surprised. Why hasn't this man tried to kill him? What he doesn't know yet is that this mysterious man is actually himself, or rather one of his future incarnations. Our protagonist has to live her whole day in each of the bodies he inhabits, whether he wants to or not. The only way to return to his own body is to solve the mystery of Evelyn's murderer. Or at least this is what he has been told by the lackey, who is a very mysterious character and who gives the protagonist the basic rules to solve the evolving enigma. First, he has 8 days to solve the case. Second, it is useless for him to try to run away, as this would only be a huge waste of time and the loss of the opportunity to take advantage of the cleverness of an eventual incarnation that could be very useful to solve the case. Third, if he wants to stop the endless loop, he must solve the case. And if he cannot save the murder victim within the given time, when he goes to sleep on the 8th night, his mind will be erased and he will have to start again the same day, but in another body. Fourth, this will happen even if he tries to kill someone or escape from the situation. As we can see, our protagonist has only one way out: to find Evelyn's murderer, but he will be able to solve the problem, or at the end of the 8th day will he be entrapped in the infinitive loop forever and Evelyn will finally die? I must confess that I found this book to be a revelation. It is interesting, cleverly written, and has an ingenious plot. Stuart Tartan has done an amazing job of setting up the whole scenario in a way that keeps the readers interested, but at the same time keeps them confused almost until the very end. For the second book, I chose what I personally believe to be the novel that revolutionized the horror genre, not only because it was written by a woman at a time when the literary world was dominated by men, but also because of the originality of the story. I'm talking about Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. It all begins with a young explorer writing to his sister Margaret about the incredible story of a castaway man who introduces himself as Dr. Victor Frankenstein of Geneva. According to Margaret's brother, Dr. Frankenstein begins his tale by telling of his childhood and the early death of his mother, sick with scarlet fever. After falling into psychological trauma, Frankenstein cultivates an impossible dream to create a more intelligent and long-lived human being. Having acquired unexpected medical knowledge, he begins to study the decomposition of corpses, gaining the knowledge that will lead him to create a living creature from dead matter. For the Doctor, this is the beginning of a nightmare of madness, a murder committed by the monster he has created, which will take him to start a long hunt around the world, following the tracks of the monster to kill it and avenge the acts it has committed. This hunt takes him to the North Pole, where he meets Margaret's brother, Captain Walton, and here the story of Frankenstein ends. Walton writes another letter to his sister, telling her the death of his friend Victor and how he had promised to continue his mission to find and kill the monster. Perhaps many of you have heard of it, but for those of you who have not read it or are not familiar with the book, let me give you a curious fact about this work. Frankenstein was born as a game. During a trip to Switzerland to pass the time, Mary Shelley, along with her husband and some of her friends, decided to have a contest where the participants had to create a horror story. The most frightening would be the winner. It was thanks to this frivolous competition that the author came up with the idea of this monster, now immortalized through the centuries. We started talking about a thriller and then move on to a gothic horror story, and now it's time to talk about the third book. But which is the last title we are going to talk about today? When you hear the name of the book and author I have chosen to close this episode, many of you may think that my choice was obvious, and you are probably right, but honestly, how could I not choose the master of the horror genre. But before we go any further, let me tell you that this book has a bonus, as it will give you an original idea for Halloween costume. The novel that ends this video is It by Stephen King. In Derry, a small town in Maine, fall has arrived with a torrential downpour that never seems to end. For local boy George Dan Brown, the most fun he can have is to play with a paper boat his older brother Bill has made for him. On one of these rainy days, George, well covered in his bright yellow raincoat, was playing in the water-soaked street, and George was in danger to lose his beloved toy. As it happens, the water currents push his little boat down a drainage ditch next to the sidewalk, and it disappears from the boy's sight. In an attempt to retrieve it, George sticks his hand down the drain in what will be the last act of his life. A terrifying creature dressed as a clown rips off his arm and kills him. George's brother Bill and a group of friends with whom he founded the Losers Club, 7 boys capable of imagining a world without monsters, fight against this evil creature, but it is an implacable enemy, and to defeat it, the boys must face very difficult trials and risk their own lives. If you prefer, you can watch the film based on this novel after reading the book. Personally, I recommend you read the book or watch the movie during the day, and if you do it in the company of someone, much the better. If Stephen King is called the King of Horror, it is not for nothing. He knows how to write frightening stories that make your skin get goosebumps, and as in this case, it is best to avoid the sewer holes. I hope I've given you some interesting book suggestions and unknown facts, and if I've given you some good ideas for your Halloween costume, even better. As always, thank you for joining me to the end of today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it all. Please let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. I would love to read them. And if you haven't already done so, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and share this video with someone you think might be interested. As usual, I'll see you next week.